What happens when one of America's most trusted journalists faces one of the world's most controversial royals under the dim, deliberate glow of NBC's nightly news studio? What was scheduled as a calm and thoughtful interview unfolded instead as a clash of ego, tension, and raw defiance that played out in silence as much as in words. Meghan Markle walked onto the stripped-down set with the air of someone prepared for battle, rather than conversation. Her posture sharp, chin tilted just enough to suggest control, and a smile that looked carefully rehearsed but not truly warm. Lester Holt greeted her with his signature steadiness, the composed professionalism that had made him a fixture in American homes for decades, and for a brief second it seemed the exchange might remain polite, even respectful. But once the cameras settled and the first question landed, the temperature in the room began to change. Lester, as measured as ever, opened gently, asking how she had adjusted to life in America since stepping away from the monarchy. But Meghan's eyes flickered with impatience before she spoke, her words cutting with deliberate precision. Adjustment? Lester, I didn't come here to adjust. I came here to live freely. There's nothing to adapt to when you finally stop being suffocated. People should stop framing my life as some endless struggle to adapt and start recognizing it as me finally being who I've always been. Her voice lingered in the air, sharp against the hush of the studio. Lester, unshaken, nodded as if absorbing the blow, calmly reframing the question, suggesting that many were curious about the differences she had experienced between the ancient institution she left and the independence she had now built. But Meghan leaned back with a faint smirk tugging at her lips and interrupted him before the thought could settle. "Why does it always go back to the monarchy?" she asked, her tone edged with frustration. "Is there any interview where I'm not dragged back into it? I walked away. Yet here we are, still obsessed. Perhaps it's the media that needs to evolve, Lester." The words landed like a challenge, the silence between them now stretching taut. Lester pressed forward, his composure unchanged, shifting to safer ground, asking how parenthood had shaped her perspective. Meghan released a short laugh, but it carried no humor, only dismissal. "Parenthood is parenthood," she said flatly. "Do you want me to give you the fairy tale version? The picture-perfect royal family soundbite? Because if that's what you're fishing for, Lester, you won't get it." Her eyes narrowed, her voice clipped as she continued. "I don't exist to inspire strangers. My children don't exist for public consumption. Maybe people should stop treating them as if they're characters in some global soap opera. They're my children. Period." The words cracked the silence like a whip, and though Lester's face betrayed almost nothing, the slight tightening of his jaw revealed the strain beneath his practiced calm. Still, he didn't flinch. "Understood," he replied evenly, before steering the conversation back to the subject that refused to leave the public's imagination. "Many Americans remain fascinated not just by your current life, but by what you left behind. The royal family has been central to your story, whether you like it or not. Do you think, in hindsight, you underestimated the weight of marrying into such an institution?" For a long second, Meghan froze, her expression still, her polished smile returning, but thinner, more brittle than before. "Did I underestimate?" she repeated slowly, her voice steady at first before climbing in pitch. "No, I knew exactly what I was getting into. The problem wasn't me underestimating anything. The problem was everyone else underestimating me. Do you understand the difference, Lester?" Her words came with a challenge, daring him to contradict her. Lester gave a small, calm nod, prepared to respond, but before he could finish his thought, she cut him off, her voice rising now with open irritation. "Because what? Because it's so hard to believe I was capable? Or is it easier to cling to the narrative that I was naive, fragile, weak? That's the story people like to tell, Lester, that I couldn't handle it. But I'm telling you, I wasn't fragile then, and I'm not fragile now." The studio seemed to hold its breath, the silence after her declaration heavier than the words themselves, the low hum of the lights the only sound in the room. Lester remained composed, his face unreadable. Yet the clash between them had already defined the interview, leaving viewers at home to wonder whether this was an exchange of truth or simply two worlds colliding, one determined to probe, the other determined never to yield. Lester adjusted his glasses and drew a measured breath, his calm voice firming slightly as he said, "Thank you for clarifying." But already the balance of the room was shifting. What had begun as a respectful interview was morphing into something sharper, combative, and Meghan seemed eager to lean into the friction. The hum of the overhead lights filled the silence, casting their glow across a set that felt less like a studio and more like a boxing ring. Meghan's posture was rigid, her shoulders squared, chin lifted in defiance, her eyes holding not the warmth of conversation but the glint of confrontation. Lester leaned forward slightly, steadying his voice. I appreciate your perspective, Meghan. Let me ask you something more personal. Your relationship with Harry. Many viewers wonder how the two of you balance public pressure with private life. How do you support each other through it all? It was meant as a softening question, designed to humanize the atmosphere, but Meghan's lips curled into a smirk that looked rehearsed. Support. Lester, do you think we sit around giving each other pep talks like some reality TV couple? Harry and I don't need to balance anything. We're not amateurs at life. People underestimate us constantly, as if we're barely holding it together. It's insulting, really. Lester nodded slowly, letting her words settle before answering. I didn't mean to suggest anything of the sort. I was asking in the sense that many couples find strength in sharing their challenges. Viewers at home might relate to that. Meghan crossed her arms, her tone sharpened. Viewers at home? Lester, I didn't come here to give a self-help seminar. My marriage isn't a public case study. Harry and I don't exist for other people to relate to. We live our lives, and if people can't understand that, that's their problem, not mine. The black backdrop seemed to close in, amplifying the charged air. Lester glanced down at his notes, slower now, aware that every question risked becoming another sparring round. Still, he pressed on. Let's talk about the broader picture then. You've spoken openly about your feelings toward the monarchy. When you look back, what do you think of the institution you left behind? Meghan's eyes narrowed, her voice carrying an icy edge. The monarchy. Always back to the monarchy. You know what I think, Lester? I think it's outdated, antiquated, a gilded cage for everyone trapped inside. And the funny thing is, people worship it as though it's sacred, as though it represents something divine. But really, it's theater, a grand performance that eats people alive. Lester stayed outwardly calm, but his fingers tapped lightly against his notepad, the only sign of strain. He had interviewed presidents, dictators, CEOs, men who tried to intimidate him. Yet Meghan's dismissive tone carried a different sting, more personal than political. Choosing his words carefully, he said, Some would argue that while flawed, the monarchy holds cultural and historical significance. Do you feel any sense of responsibility for how your departure was perceived? Meghan let out a sharp, condescending laugh. Responsibility. Lester, I'm not responsible for people's fantasies. If the world wants to cling to a crumbling institution, that's their choice. My only responsibility is to myself and my family. If that makes me the villain in their story, then so be it. Lester tilted his head slightly, his patience thinning, though his voice remained even. I understand your frustration, but do you ever consider that the way you communicate your experiences comes across as dismissive to those who admired you? Meghan straightened, her gaze hardening, her tone colder. Dismissive? Or maybe people just don't like hearing the truth. I'm not here to be palatable, Lester. I'm not here to make everyone comfortable. If honesty unsettles people, maybe they should reflect on why. A silence followed, thick and electric. Not the empty kind, but the kind that carried weight, as though even the lights overhead were straining. Lester exhaled slowly, nodding as if absorbing the blow before pivoting again. Let me ask you this. Your late mother-in-law, Princess Diana, remains a deeply beloved figure worldwide. Many draw parallels between her experiences and yours. Do you feel a connection to her legacy? The question landed heavy like a stone dropped in still water. Meghan's jaw tightened, her posture shifting forward, eyes flashing. Diana's legacy doesn't need to be dragged into every conversation about me. It's disrespectful to keep using her name as a prop. I am not Diana. I never claimed to be, and frankly, the comparisons are lazy. She deserves better. Lester blinked, taking in her words, his voice steady but edged now. I didn't mean to suggest you were her replacement. I was asking whether you feel a connection, given how she too endured relentless media scrutiny. Meghan's reply was ice cold, her tone stripped of warmth. Connection? Diana's story is hers. My story is mine, and the constant need to weave them together says more about the media's obsession than it does about me. Lester, do you really expect me to sit here and cry for your cameras? To give you something you can splice into a neat little narrative? That's not going to happen. I don't need to lean on tragedy to validate my story. The words landed like a slap. Lester's lips pressed into a line, his hands folded on his lap. His composure held, but barely. What had begun as a conversation was now a duel. Every exchange weighted, every silence louder than the hum of the studio lights. The black backdrop swallowed the room, leaving only the two of them in a circle of light, like combatants on a stage. This was no longer journalism. It was confrontation. Lester shifted slightly, sitting straighter, his voice still calm but sharpened at the edges. Meghan, many people admired the courage it took to walk away from the royal family, but they also noticed how public life remained. Netflix, interviews, memoirs. Some say it doesn't look like an escape from the spotlight, but a rebranding within it. How do you respond? Meghan's lips curved, but her eyes stayed cold. Rebranding. That's such a tabloid word, Lester. I'm not a product. I don't owe anyone silence because I left a system that no longer fit. If I choose to tell my story, that's my right. If others can't accept that, it's their issue, not mine. Lester nodded slowly, then pressed further. But when your story is made public, doesn't that open it to scrutiny, to accountability? Meghan's eyes narrowed, her reply sharp and laced with disdain. Accountability. Interesting word. It always seems to mean holding me accountable, never the system that caused the harm. Isn't that convenient? Lester's patience thinned, though his professionalism still wrapped him like armor. His voice dropped heavier now. Accountability works both ways. If accusations are leveled against an institution, then questions about the accuser are fair. Don't you think that's part of an honest conversation? Meghan leaned forward, chin lifted. Honest conversation? This isn't honesty, Lester. It's interrogation. I came here to discuss my projects, my work, my advocacy, and yet here we are again. Monarchy, Diana, accountability, recycled endlessly. Maybe it's the press that needs accountability, for its obsession. The words hung, heavy as stone. Lester let the silence stretch, a veteran anchor's tactic, knowing silence could slice deeper than questions. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm but firmer than before. Viewers would say these questions aren't obsession. They're context. They're part of your story, whether you like it or not, Meghan scoffed, a laugh sharp enough to echo. Context? Or maybe it's just laziness. Easier to recycle the same narratives than to actually ask who I am now. But perhaps that's too much to ask, isn't it? For the first time, irritation flickered across Lester's face. Subtle, but there. A tightening of the jaw. A narrowing of the eyes. He straightened in his chair, his voice dropping lower. I've interviewed world leaders, activists, survivors of unimaginable tragedies. None of them dismissed dialogue as laziness. They engaged. They understood that dialogue, even when uncomfortable, was part of truth. That's what this platform is for. Meghan's tone turned sharper still. So now I'm to be compared to them, expected to perform gratitude for this seat? I don't need NBC to validate me, Lester. This platform isn't charity, and I'm not desperate for it. The tension thickened, suffocating. The shadows stretched deeper across the black backdrop, the hum of the lights louder, harsher. Meghan's words were clipped, brittle with arrogance, every syllable edged. Lester's restraint thinned visibly, but his tether to professionalism held him steady. He chose his next question carefully, his voice quieter but carrying a weight that demanded attention. Let's talk about your husband. Many admire Prince Harry's willingness to walk away with you. But others argue he sacrificed more. His family, his role, his country. How do you see his journey? Meghan's eyes flashed, her back stiffened. Harry made his choice because he's strong enough to stand by me. Don't frame it as though I dragged him. He isn't some prince lost at sea. He's a man who saw the truth and acted. If others can't respect that, it reflects on them, not on us. Lester leaned back, his face tightening, voice lower than before, cutting with precision. Do you ever worry, Meghan, that your voice overshadows his? Lester's question landed with precision. Did Meghan's voice overshadow Harry's? The moment hit a nerve. Meghan's face hardened, her tone cold as ice. Overshadows, she shot back. Maybe people just aren't used to a woman being the center of the narrative instead of the silent accessory. Maybe the real problem is that people can't stomach the idea of a woman owning her story. Her words rang like a gauntlet thrown, and the studio thickened with tension. Lester inhaled slowly, his patience stretched thin. His reply came measured, deliberate. No one questions your right to your story, Meghan. What people struggle with is the contradiction, rejecting the monarchy while profiting from its legacy, demanding privacy while signing deals that showcase your private life. These contradictions matter. Meghan leaned forward, her voice sharp, rising. Contradictions, or maybe complexity? But nuance doesn't sell, does it, Lester? You'd rather box me into a villain role. It makes for good television. For the first time, Lester's calm veneer cracked. His brows drew tight, his lips pressed into a firm line. He didn't speak right away, but the silence that followed was sharper than any words. The studio felt ready to shatter. Meghan sat rigid, chin high, defiant. Lester, still composed, cleared his throat and tried once more to steady the air. "Meghan, this isn't an ambush. These questions come from a place of accountability, something you've said you value. So let me ask plainly. Do you believe the choices you and Harry made have brought you closer to peace?" Her laugh sliced through the air, brittle and dismissive. "Peace? I don't think the media even understands the word. And I'm not here to satisfy the curiosity of people who've made careers out of dissecting me. Peace is mine whether anyone chooses to recognize it or not." Lester nodded, jaw tight. His tone turned firmer, less yielding. "Yet here you are. Another program, another interview. Some might say if peace were truly yours, you wouldn't need the spotlight again and again." For a flicker, Meghan's mask slipped. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes narrowed. "Some might say," she shot back, "that I'm here because if I don't speak, all that's left are recycled headlines from people like you." The spark caught. Lester exhaled, then set his notes aside. He leaned forward, his voice low but edged with steel. "Enough, Meghan. I've tried to give you space. I've tried to keep this respectful. But the arrogance, the dismissiveness, the way you've spoken tonight, it isn't just difficult. It's insulting. Not to me, but to viewers who expected honesty, not hostility." Meghan blinked, caught off guard. Her reply came sharp. "Insulting? What's insulting is being dragged through the mud for years, then told I should sit here smiling politely while you question my every move." "I don't need this." Lester's voice cut through hers, not louder but heavier. "No, Meghan. What you don't need is to treat every question as an attack. What you don't need is to pretend you're above accountability. You say you despise the monarchy, but your platform exists because of it. You say you want privacy, but you cash multi-million-dollar deals to put your life on display. That's not courage. That's hypocrisy." The words hung like a hammer. Meghan froze, pale under the lights. For once, no quick comeback came. Lester pressed, his tone unwavering. "You talk about truth, about power. But the truth is this. Without Harry, without the title you claim to despise, you wouldn't be in that chair. Tonight you haven't spoken as a leader or advocate, but as someone convinced the world owes her difference. It doesn't." The silence that followed was suffocating. Meghan's lips parted, her hand tightening on the sofa's edge. You can't speak to me like that," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lester didn't flinch. "I just did, and I did it because the audience deserves honesty. This interview cannot continue." "Not like this." Meghan shot to her feet, her blazer snapping back across her shoulders. She gathered her things, movements sharp, her face flushed. "Fine," she snapped. "If this is what you wanted, congratulations. I won't sit here and be humiliated." Her heels clattered against the studio floor as she strode out. The door slammed like a gavel, ending a trial. Lester remained seated, exhaling slowly, calm restored. He turned to the camera, his tone steady, almost somber. "Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you an apology. This was meant to be a conversation, an opportunity for Meghan to share her perspective. Instead, it became something else, and for that I regret how it ended. Respect must flow both ways. Tonight it did not." He paused, letting the words linger, then gave the faintest shake of his head. "We'll be right back." The screen cut to black. The implosion was complete.